On this segment of Dark Oddity, we're going to dive into the history of America's first serial killer. Ooh. From torture chambers to secret passageways to trap doors and vats of acid. Chicago, 1885. Police find evidence of torture and murder in what later is deemed the Castle of Murder. H. Holmes, born Herman Webster Mudgett in 1861, will become America's first serial killer.
Oh, with a name like that.
He created a castle. They called it a castle. He bought a large property with storefronts at the bottom floor, 2 other stories, 1 of regular apartments, and the top floor somehow had 35 apartments. Now, he just happened to create this building at the same time as the Chicago World's Fair was going on, knowing that people would need places to stay. So he crammed 35 apartments into this one floor. The only thing is that the apartments, some of them had no way in or out. Some had gas lines attached to it and were completely air sealed. There were chutes that went from the 3rd floor right to the basement, where the vats of acid were, and the crematorium.
Whoa.
And they say he could have murdered around 200 people.
Oh my God.
55 were specifically attributed to staying at his place during the World's Fair that were never heard of again. He killed numerous partners, numerous girlfriends, although he was married to 3 women at one time. He never killed his wives, but he did kill
what a nice guy.
his mistresses. He killed anybody that was around him.
Wow.
And
What kind
created
of
this
background childhood did he have?
Seriously.
a very good one. He was very intelligent. He graduated from medical school at an early age, and he worked in the anatomy department. So he had a lot of practice with cadavers.
Yeah, but there's a lot. Well, what kind of childhood?
Well, very religious mother, strict father. He was born in 1861. So, that time period, I guess you would figure religion.
That's when he was born?
Yeah. So in 1885, he builds this. He's probably killed a few dozen people already.
So this is 100 years into our country's history now.
Pretty much.
Just because you said he was the first serial killer that we know of. Anyway.
Well, I think that's
we know
the
of.
big deal is like the fact that all of this was apparently premeditated and that he built this building
Wow.
to essentially
that's
trap
going,
people in. Like,
That takes serial killing to a
Right.
whole new level.
that's, yeah, exactly.
The Death Factory.
Wow.
yeah, exactly.
He had several jobs in the pharmacy business. He had jobs teaching. He had jobs at some of the schools doing anatomy and stuff like that. And then he figured the easiest way for him to make money, he was also a con artist making money, but he figured back then it was still big money for these colleges to get cadavers to work on. So he would just kill the people, skin them, and bring their skeletons to the university. He was getting $200 a skeleton in 1885.
Wow.
That's big money.
Yeah.
Well, that was a big business for grave robbers, right? They used to bring them to.
But he just skipped the digging part and he was just whacking
Now,
them and bringing them over.
Is that building still there?
Well, that building was right after he was charged in 1891. There was an arson at the building. Of course, the neighbors probably just wanted it gone. Didn't burn down, though. And subsequently, the post office took over the property, and there was a post office until 1935, 35 or 38.
Well, that just
Where
makes a
at
whole
that
lot
point,
of
the
sense.
post office raised the entire property for only, to build a new and improved post office on, because the building had been 75 years old at that point. So.
And then you just brought up grave robbers. Wasn't he the guy who...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you know where I'm going with it.
So, because he had done this so many people, he had taken bodies and sold them. He wanted to make sure it didn't happen to him, and his last wish was to be buried in a concrete slab, which he was. Which he was.
Dark.
Yeah.
And poignantly enough, they dug him out because all of a sudden, some modern day detectives were linking him as Jack the Ripper, saying that wasn't the H.H. Holmes was not hung, which he was. He was hung. I'll get into that in a minute. But they say that wasn't him, and he actually fled over to England and started the Whitechapel killings. Now, because it was such a strong tie to this, and they had some real good evidence that it may have been him, they dug him out, busted open the concrete slab, and did some DNA and dental records, and they did prove that it was him in the grave.
So they still
So he wasn't Jack the Ripper.
It wasn't Jack the Ripper. So basically, he gets hung, his neck doesn't snap, and he just twitches for 15 minutes on the end of the rope.
Whoa.
That's how he finally met his match in 1895. Oddly enough, he doesn't get pinned for any of these murders, though. He has a partner, a con artist partner, that they're swindling everybody they possibly can. And he convinces his partner that I can get a cadaver, I could do some damage to it where they won't know, and we'll tell them it's you, he says to his partner. And his partner's like, okay, how much can we get? He's like, we can get $10,000. Back then, that's a lot of money. That's hundreds of thousands probably in today's, inflation.
Right.
So he convinces his partner to do this. He gets his partner's wife and their 5 kids to all agree. The 5 kids, whatever, but they agree. And then he goes and kills his partner anyway. So the partner's dead. He doesn't tell the wife. He says, yeah, your husband's fine. Don't worry. You know what? Give me your 3 children. I'll take them to your husband and let them hide out together until this all blows over. He happens to get locked up right before that happens for some scam. He ends up in a jail cell where he talks to his new cellmate and says, listen, I got this scam going. I'll give you $500 if you can find me a lawyer who will go along with this. So the guy in the cell goes, oh, yeah, okay. Right? H.H. Holmes gets out, goes to get the 3 kids, and for some strange reason, he travels back and forth across half the country numerous times. Philly to Chicago to San Antonio to Toronto.
Who the hell's his lawyer? Johnny Cochran?
Back then, who knows? If he represented. Well, I'll even get into his trial. Don't worry, this is wild. So he takes these kids across the country 6 or 7 times.
What year was this?
And this is 1888.
So this is railroad
89.
travel, then.
Yeah, railroad. Yeah.
This is taking
And
time.
the oldest daughter was like 15, and there was a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old that he has that the woman gave. Hey, go take my kids. Yeah, my husband's somewhere. I haven't heard from him, but take my kids to him. Travels all across the country back and forth 100 times. And then finally he gets to Boston, and because the cellmate never got his $500, he turned over to the detectives and goes, he killed his partner. And they could prove it. Okay, so the Pinkertons get involved. And they track him to Boston. They arrest him. No kids. Nobody knows where the kids are. He won't cop to the kids. Kids are with their father, he keeps saying. One of the detectives decides to follow his trail. The oldest daughter kept writing to the mother every couple of days. She missed her mother, and she kept writing. And there was dozens of letters that Holmes never even mailed, but he had on his person, in his luggage. The one detective went to every spot that the girl wrote a letter from, found out where they were staying and where they went after that, found the 8-year-old's bones in a fire pit, and somewhere in Toronto they found the 2 little girls buried in a shallow grave.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
Yeah, this guy, dirtbags. I want to say worse, but we have to bleep it. So he gets pinched for it, but he never goes to trial for anything other than killing his partner. And he gets sentenced to death for it. Meanwhile, there's all these people missing that were in this hotel. They can't prove it in 1889. They can't prove it. And the 3 kids, I don't know why they never charged him for that. So he goes to trial, and on like the second day of his trial, he dismisses his attorneys and represents himself. And keeps holding that his partner's actually alive. He never killed anybody. He's an upstanding citizen. And then all of a sudden, when things aren't looking good, he hires the same team back to represent him. And while he's sitting in jail, he starts writing his memoirs. And he goes from never doing anything bad So all of a sudden, Coppington's killing 200 people, calling himself the devil and everything else. And when they strapped the hood on him with the noose, he says, "I am innocent, never did any of this." And right before he died, they found a letter in his cell. And he says, just like the poet who is forced to prose, I am the murderer who is forced to kill. And they hung him. He twitched for 15 minutes because his neck never stopped, and he died. They buried him in the cement. And
Now, someone like that,
I would not honor his last wish.
no.
well, back then in I think it was 1895 when
Wow.
this all,
But
when he
someone
was
like
dead.
that has to, like you would think, like, that's an attachment, right? Like, that
Yeah, right.
is a haunting,
And you have to think
personal.
that he created this whole floor with these 35
that's-
rooms.
With these with these crazy.
That is-
There's no
Yeah.
electricity,
That is a whole
so you can hardly
building.
navigate with your little lantern through these darkened hallways, staircases that led nowhere, doors that opened to brick walls, rooms with no windows or doors, and they found that there was like pinch points where you could open up, parts of the floor and parts of the walls to find the chutes that went down to the basement, and they found actual bones down there. They couldn't differentiate human from animal bones back then because science didn't, happen yet, and there was no fingerprint. They couldn't do fingerprints until like 1905. So they pinned him for one murder, and they hung him for it. And that SOB, should have gotten a lot worse than that.
Wow.
What's worse than death?
I was just going to say that.
No,
multiple.
I mean, they got him
There are many things that are worse than death. So,
Wow.
to the pain.
the exact words from his memoir was, "I was born with the devil in me. I could not help the fact that I was a murderer no more than the poet can help the inspiration to sing. I was born with the evil one standing as my sponsor beside the bed where I was ushered into the world, and he has been with me since."
That's heavy.
That's.
That and that is a haunting.
Yeah,
folks.
There you go.
For sure, dude. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's hard to imagine that a human is capable of something like that.
Yeah,
Crazy, man.
you really have to, like,
That's a whole nother level.
Yep.
Oh boy.
So there's a very, very good book that I read that is actually about him. And the author has written a couple more things. It seems he's very interested in this type of stuff as you continue on. It's the Devil in the White City.
Yeah, I've read this. Yeah. Read a little bit on that. I didn't read the book, but I definitely saw some of the excerpts.
It was very, very
I
good.
watched a couple of videos on them too, as well. A lot of conflicting stories because of time passage and not many records.
Yeah.
Right, but the thing
You
the
know.
thing that held very tightly is just the building itself and the fact that there were stairways and doors. The door would open. You'd open up a door and there'd be a wall directly
Yeah.
behind it.
Yeah,
You
it's like
walk down this hallway, and there's no doors in the hallway at all. It just you get to the staircase and it goes down, and the staircase would get smaller.
right. It's not only designed to kill you; it's designed
to
to
fuse you.
terrorize you,
Right.
and then kill you.
Absolutely.
Right.
Like that's
crazy.
extreme.
Wow.
Yeah.
Also, just that need to be that eccentric or that to build
Right,
like
right,
that. let's
right,
say.
right. You could.
But isn't the owner of what's that gun? That famous gun manufacturer,
Oh,
Winchester?
Winchester.
Winchester.
She was
The-
crazy, though. Yeah.
built in the same,
Same
her
fashion,
house,
yeah,
the same
yeah,
fashion.
yeah.
You know, stairs that led to nowhere, doors that led to
Oh, I
open
didn't
to
know
walls.
any of that.
Yeah, you just no one ever was able
This
to
was who? The
understand
owner
the
of-
house.
Winchester.
Winchester.
No, the heir. The heir to
you-
The heir to,
Winchester.
the heir to
Mary
You'd go-
Winchester.
You'd go
Yeah,
down
like-
a hallway and you'd follow through, and you'd go back the same way, and somehow you wouldn't end back up where
Right,
you
you'd end
started.
up in a different spot somehow.
And
yeah.
And they
She-
say she did that
Crazy.
to appease or confuse the spirits of the guns that killed them that her family
Right.
created.
But that gets
That's
to my
super
point.
interesting.
It's she did it because of, could it be an attachment, or like the way he built? Could that be he built like that to confuse the spirits of the people he murdered? The same thing. That same.
He more aptly did it because to just kill people, not caring about their spirits. Because when you're so rampant on death, there is nothing else after.
But you could
At least not to your victims. Your victims don't have any worth. That's why you're murdering people, because they have no worth. If they had worth, you wouldn't be a killer.
Right.
That's what prevents us from killing each other, because to me your life has worth and value.
Right. But that's the human part of it. It has
Yeah.
no worth to
There's
a
no
killer.
Yeah, these people aren't.
But to a killer,
Mm-hmm.
their soul, their ghost, let's
Mm-hmm.
say, to a killer, it would be your body has no worth, but I don't want your ghost coming back to haunt me, so I'm going to confuse you. Like that's it. It's
I
almost
get
like
what you're saying. I get what you're
like,
saying. I don't think it applies to Holmes. Mary Winchester is a whole other story. I think they're both out of their brains, but who knows for sure? You don't know.
I think they're both
You don't
haunted
know.
by something.
I mean,
That
Holmes
could have been
just
around for
had a need to kill.
hundreds and hundreds of years. This whatever it is that attaches.
That's
to
so
people.
much more than you need to kill. If you just needed to kill, you could just stab a bunch of people.
Well, here's the thing, though. Those
You
kind
don't
of
build
people,
a whole building if you just
You
feel
kill
like
and you
killing
like
people.
it, you do it again.
It's the thrill.
It's like, yeah, it's like,
Okay, so when you're a sociopath, you get no ups and downs. There's no depression, there's no sadness, there's no joy, there's no happiness. You are here flatlined. But when you kill, you get that jolt. You get that adrenaline rush. And that's how psychopaths are.
So why would you go through
That part of
something
the brain
so
doesn't work.
complicated as to build this building?
Because there's the thrill. Your thrill.
So why don't you
only
just go
thrill.
for something that's convenient? If you just want the thrill, then I could just stab you and then I
That's
get my
my
thrill.
thing.
No,
with
no, no.
the-
Because
It's the
it's-
power.
Right.
It's the
Because
power
to me it's right.
of watching
Deeper
the
than
maze,
that.
the
Right,
rats
see,
in
that's
the
my
maze.
point.
It's the
The
more
ma-
of the
yeah.
torture and the fear and
Exactly.
the power
It's
that
the
you have
creating
over
that
it's the
terror.
bigger
victim.
thrill in the end.
Yes.
Right.
You're not a murderer at that point.
Yeah.
You're a terrorist.
Right, exactly. You're
Yeah.
psychological terrorizing.
Yes.
I am
That's
your
where
God.
they get their power from.
Right, right.
Taking
right,
your
right, right.
life at that point.
Because
these
if it was the
psychos.
kill, then like you said, they would just. But it's the power leading up to, and then when the murder is done, they need to feed that power again. So it's terrorizing and grabbing somebody else, and
This is terrible.
it is.
Dreams about this.
I know it's so interesting. that,
Go home and watch a Disney
that
film.
macabre stuff is so interesting, for lack of a better word, that you can't help but think about it. But it is so like dark and
Scary.
Yep.
Yeah, right. And so-
Scary. People are like that. There's people in the world right now like that.
Sure. Yeah.
I think with technology they could do to people.
Right. Oh
If
my
they could
gosh.
do that back then, what could they do now?
The one guy that was like the leading therapist or whatever, he would take x-rays of their brains or CAT scans of their brains. And then he would do it to his family just to do comparisons. These are known sociopaths. Here's their brain scans. Let me do my family too, and we'll put them together and see if we can pick out, as he taught classes and stuff like that. He did his own. His own came back sociopathic. And his wife was like, yeah, I mean, he's got no highs and lows. But he was a good guy. He didn't
Right. That
murder.
doesn't necessarily make you a bad person. I don't
Yeah,
think, you know.
you just don't have,
Right.
and I guess as a child, if you don't find that stimulus somewhere, you start killing the animals, getting the thrill a little bit, and then as you get older, you gain more, tenacity to actually do it to people. And I think that's how serial killers evolve into, some of these horrible stories and shit like that. And people who need cigarette breaks that,
You have lots of highs and lows. Shut up. That was a high and a low at the same time.
Yeah, pretty much. Pretty much.
That was the poltergeist.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right. that
The
was-
poltergeist.
Yeah.
Brian, that was your line.